topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning, listeners. It's Tuesday morning, and our sincere apologies for starting out late. So we were having some technical issues on our guest side, and they could not join. So we figured it out, and we are here. That's what matters. So thank you to everyone for who has purchased our books, and really appreciate it because we have been able to help so many entrepreneurs across the globe through kiva.org. And folks, if you have not got our books, both of our books are full of nuggets that can help you build relationship with yourself, become the influencer you're looking for. And I'm not just talking about the numbers and large number of followers. I'm talking about creating meaningful impact. And remember, as a part of that, you can create an impact through us across the world. And I invite you and highly encourage you to spend that hour of your time every month by helping someone, whether it's your family or strangers. So let's bring on our guest. Welcome, Gavin.
Nice to be with you, Divya, and your listeners.
Absolutely. So tell us, do you recall a moment from your childhood that still stands out for you today?
Well, yes, I had a pretty dramatic teenage years. Up until 10 or 11, my life was going swimmingly well. But I grew up in a family where I had an older sister, 7 years older, and an older brother, 5 years older. So when I was 10, my sister started being a heroin addict for 17 years. My brother, who was 15 when I was 10, he started a life of crime, and he really went all the way, Divya. He started doing burglary and then kidnapping and then murder, and then he became a white supremacist gang leader in the prisons. So the whole shade of my life into darkness and into challenge, when all that happened to me and my mom and dad, was very, very challenging. But it did catapult me into doing my work as a therapist and working with entrepreneurs and leadership.
So how did that impact you as a child, and especially your relationship with your parents?
Well, interestingly enough, and I love them dearly, but they weren't psychologically or, life aware to realize that I was having challenges dealing with all of this. Now, I didn't help the matter because I presented myself as doing fine, because I didn't want to cause them any additional problems. So in those years were so difficult is that I started to move into a lot of anxiety. I was afraid I would do something like my brother and sister. I had a lot of trauma. So I was really just hanging on for life. Thankfully, my relationship with my dad was so loving and has always been. It was the through line of connection that brought me through. We walked through it together.
You have had a rough start to the life, and one of the things that what I'm realizing is that you didn't say that I'm going to throw in the towel, and just because you hear these stories so many times. I've heard it from my clients. Oh, because my dad
Right.
or because my brother, or because my mom was, or because my grandparents were X, Y, and Z, I continued doing the same thing. As a matter of fact, just yesterday, I had a client who was sharing his story about drinking issue. And the key is that, like, how do you break that cycle?
Mhm.
So as you grew up,
Yeah.
what led you to becoming a therapist?
Well, interestingly enough, I was drawn to psychology because it was a place where, as a sensitive man, a young man, a lot of women were in psychology and they welcomed me sharing myself. I couldn't do that in business. I couldn't do that in engineering, but I could do that in psychology classes. And I happened to have some extraordinary teachers that woke me up. But throughout my bachelor's and master's, Divya, spirituality was not mentioned once. Didn't even, it wasn't in the frame of cosmology of how they approached the world and the role of therapy. So it was when I was 25, after I got my degree, that I went into a transformational workshop, and the whole deeper level of me, the love and the wisdom and compassion, the spiritual, just opened up wide. And then I could go ahead and I've been doing, rich work with people ever since, because my gift of empathy, of being able to support people in a healing way, in an empowering way, they opened up when I did that training work.
Mm. So what does spirituality mean to you?
Well, the way I look at it, it's not a philosophy, it's an experience. So I have clients come to me all the time and they say, I'm not spiritual. And I said, okay. I said, well, could you tell me some of the richest experiences that you've had in this life? And they reflect and they might say something like, there was one time when I was out in Big Sur, California, and I was walking on the coast, and I don't know how to explain it, but a presence opened up inside of me and I was connected with nature and it changed me. Or they might say, the birth of my son, something happened inside of me of a very deep, compassionate nature, a joyful nature, and it's been awake ever since. So I
Mhm.
think it's a natural part of us. It's just the deepest part of us. I like the way Lincoln describes it as the better angels of our nature.
Well, that is so true. And so many times what happens is that we get caught up in our day-to-day lives and we forget to live. And especially when you talked about nature, it resonated with me.
Hmm.
And just a few days back, I was just walking down. We had rain, and the sound of rain can be so refreshing.
Yeah.
And as I was walking down, there was this tiny little tree,
Hmm.
and the sun's rays were just falling on it. It was morning, and there were
Hmm.
tiny little droplets, and it seemed like there were thousands of diamonds on that,
Wow.
and little rainbows
Yeah.
captured in it.
Yeah.
And in that moment, you
Mhm.
just forget
Of
who
course.
you are,
Right.
where you're at, and you connect with that thread, which
Yes.
is one, which connects you one with the nature, which connects you one with that consciousness
Hmm.
or presence, whatever we want to call it. And to
Right.
me, that's also spirituality.
Yes, I hear you. And when you mentioned that despite my difficulties, I didn't let them, keep me down. I really do believe that we're in this life. Life isn't here to punish us. It isn't here to defeat us. It's here to invite us and to strengthen us. And so to me, I think we're all on a hero's journey, and everybody has some measure of trauma or difficulty that they adapt to in a way that they move away from who they are. And then they need to journey back home and reconnect with who they are. And the thing that I'm astonished about spirituality is it's experienced so uniquely by each person. It's not a philosophy. I mean, I have some clients who their form of meditation is knitting. When they knit and they're holding the fabric and they're watching this, they move. It's like rosary beads for a Catholic, person. It's the key is finding out what touches your heart and do your best to nestle up next to that and engage that energy. And it wants to grow. It wants to be available to us, in my experience.
It's there.
Yeah,
It's just for us
it's
to
it's
uncover.
there.
And
Yeah. Yeah, like when I did that seminar, that transformational experiential workshop, which was facilitated beautifully and lovingly whatever it was that was inside of me that I did not even know was there, it was like a pilot light went on and the furnace started working, and my view of the world all of a sudden started to make sense, and then I could go ahead and start my private practice.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And the key is to keep on bringing it more and more in our lives, and it's hard. And here's the thing, even if you bring it few minutes a day, it's still
Mhm.
better than nothing, because then it helps you deal with difficult situations. And so, okay, going through this, like, as we talk about,
Yeah.
let's move this into we talking about the authentic leadership in
Yes.
the corporate world. So currently, like, a lot of things are happening. So let's explore some scenarios. So
Okay.
one is there's so much uncertainty right now. So many people are being laid off.
Yeah.
And during this situation, what happens is, as people are being laid off, leaders or like managers or directors, they're feeling the pinch too. They don't know if their job will be there. And at the
Right.
same token, now they feel that responsible
Right.
for their employees, like, how to say that,
Mhm.
those words that people dread,
Mhm.
that, hey, we are going to lay you off.
Yes.
How can they share with employees authentically and still be vulnerable and still be empathetic?
Yes. Well, in your introduction to your show, when you talk about your work, I love that you talked about the centrality of relationships, because relationships are so central to us coming into who we are, knowing who we are. And in business, it couldn't be more true. So, as a leader, to be able to cultivate a relationship that is genuine, that the person trusts you, there's safety, there can be risks in the relationship. If you have that kind of a strong relationship, even if you have to have a talk that says, unfortunately, we need to let you go, you can do that with dignity. You can honor the person. You can even say vulnerably, this is extraordinarily painful to me. I even wonder sometimes about my job, because there's something about leaders being willing to be vulnerable rather than presenting that they have it all together and being invulnerable, which it undermines completely their connection to their power and their depth. And then they can't establish those vibrant, genuine relationships. But in the same way, for those that are left at the company, how do you then address those and talk vulnerably about what's going on? And how do you then encourage them to step up through this challenge so they're not just contracted by it? All of that done is through the heart, but it takes courage to let our humanity be a part of the mix. It just
Hmm.
takes it just takes courage.
And you brought up a really good point,
Hmm.
that sharing with them that, hey, I'm also wondering about my job,
Right,
and honoring the person. And
right,
when we talk about honoring the moment,
right.
that during that moment, most of the employees do connect, because as an executive coach, as I've been working with for past so many years with a lot of leaders along with professionals, people identify with their jobs. And that's one of the things that
Mhm.
I want to bring to the point is that your thoughts, your feelings, and your job is not who you are.
Right,
You are that presence that we talked about initially.
right.
You are something so powerful that we only scratch our surface.
Mhm,
We talk about potential and all that,
mhm.
and we don't even scratch it because we
Yes,
are not in touch with it all the time. So you talked about people being left back. And
mm,
this happens. And what happens is that, like, work that was being done by 10 people now is being done by 3 people.
mhm.
So not only their morale is down, not only they are being overworked,
Right.
not only, like, the leaders are not in a good position because they don't know if they'll be there,
Mhm,
especially because of managers. And now we are talking leaders, and we'll come to the other one, like leader with no title, a little bit later.
mhm.
So what can employees and leaders do in such a situation to maintain that relationship?
Well, there first needs to be an assessment of the quality of the relationship, because there may be a company and there may be leaders in that company that are not connected with their heart. They're not connected with honoring their employees independent of behavior. because that's the mark of a good leader, is they make a distinction between the essence within someone and then their performance. Those are two very separate arenas. And if an employee gets related to, and they know they're being related on both fronts, then they can be more creative and it can be a safer place. So if you assess, see, because it may be, and I'm sure you've seen this, Divya, where 3 people are left to do 10 jobs, and maybe 2 of those people decide to move on because it's actually not a humane situation. They'd actually have to betray themselves and abandon themselves or neglect themselves under all of the stress. So I'm just emphasizing, and the manager could choose to go. So, but each of them has to determine and discern, is this job still aligned for me? Can I still grow here? Can I contribute? Am I seen? Am I listened to? Is there a safe space here? And more businesses are recognizing that the personal part of our lives, the internal part of our lives, is the foundation of a good employee and a good leader. It has to be brought in. It's part of the equation. So if, let's say, you're a manager and you have 3 people left and you get together with them, you want to create a safe space where they can talk about their process. They can talk. It's a traumatic thing to have that happen. And to think that you can't talk to your boss about it, that's going to be a dysfunctional relationship and organization. And I'm also confessing, what percentage of leaders actually know how to do that? My guess would be, I don't know about yours, but I come up with intuitive like 18%, you know?
Well, here's what I'll share with you, Gavin, is that there are studies out there that show that most people leave companies because of their bosses. So forget about like having higher percentage of leaders. It's so many times what happens is there are a lot of individual contributors who are really good in their technical work.
Yeah.
They are productive, they're performing wonderfully. And now because they're checking boxes, what happens is they get promoted and then they're not trained to be the leaders. Because think about it. A lot of awareness is coming in and our schools and everything is being taught. And just let's go back to the therapy that, you were taught, but we shy away from the word spirituality because we think that there's a connotation of religion. At the same time, in our schools, we are not teaching about how to achieve goals. We are not teaching about how to be a leader. So what happens is that manager or a director or VP or CEO for that matter is
wholly unprepared, right?
Yeah, they're not prepared. So we can't even say that either one, like either the employee or the leaders are to blame. And what happens is just recently, one of the senior VPs came to me and said that nobody challenges my boss, my CEO. And he makes these comments and that just makes me think if I want to stay here or not.
Yes.
So in a situation like that, how can an employee take reins in their hands and have that conversation with their boss without...
The key that you're highlighting is courageous conversations. So in this instance, the one you're talking about, there's a courageous conversation to be had. The interesting thing that's important to know is that you have to recognize the courage is in initiating the conversation. The boss may get defensive. The boss may dismiss you and not want to hear what you have to say, but you at least have to try to be honest and caring. And if that doesn't work, then maybe you can evaluate, do I want to stay here? Because remember how I talked about how I got through my dark teenage years by opening up to spirituality and my gifts. Then my life became, the through line of my life was a vibrant center where there was meaning and there was contribution. And I'm a strong believer, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, is that employees, leaders, they need to be in touch with what their meaning is, their gifts, and choose workplaces where they can be engaged in learning their soul's curriculum. They can be evolving. They can be helping other people. And if your company isn't that, even if they're paying you, a company could not pay me enough to stay in an environment that did not allow me to flourish.
So that again comes back to a choice, because
Mhm.
as we talk about, there is unfortunately the golden age of job seekers is
Mhm.
kind of gone right now, because employers are struggling to keep the lights open,
Yeah.
or lights on, so to speak, and keep the doors open.
Mhm.
So in such a situation, they may not have a choice. And yet, it's again what you talked about, that, how important this is and what could I do to overcome or surmount these obstacles and adversities, because where there's a will, there's a way. And sometimes, yes, you may have to downgrade
Yeah.
some of the materialistic things in life. It's
Yeah.
again asking that question, what's more important to me?
Yeah. Well, from a leadership perspective, if any challenges can be looked at, let's call the downturn, let's call people being laid off, let's call stress, too much work to do. Those are challenges. If approached with the eyes of leadership, not control, not domination, not ego, but leadership, called, how might this situation serve me? How could it actually be a part of me growing? What do I need to do now? Do I need to step up to the next level? Do I need to have a risking, honest conversation with my boss? Or if I'm the leader of the organization, particularly the top, they're going to have the largest influence on the culture and in that organization and the relationships, because whatever that person does, it'll go down through the leaders and it'll go down to the employees. But if that person is really dysfunctional and they have an ego and they're getting paid a lot, and they're really not paying attention to the pain that's in the organization or the leadership opportunity, you know, in some respects, companies go south all the time, even not in this economy, because of that situation. And that's what happens for me. Entrepreneurs come my way. They may even have made a lot of money, but they're not satisfied. They want to know who they are. They want to know what their gifts are, and they want to build their business around their gifts and really serving people. So they
Hmm.
kind of realign their lives in a way that it can flourish, and they feel a sense of self-honoring, and they're undeniably contributing to other people's lives. And
And that's definitely powerful, because I was recently, I'm not sure if it was a stat or a study,
mm,
something, that a lot of people have decided that, okay, this is not the kind of
that's right.
job, this is not the environment I want to stay in. And number of startups that are popping up is just amazing.
Yeah.
So there is an opportunity. So when you
Mhm.
make that decision
Yeah.
that I'm going to honor my values, I'm going to honor myself, I'm
Mhm.
going to stay by my meaning,
Mhm.
then other opportunities open up, because you start looking for different things. And as a matter of fact, just recently I was seeing a study. So what happened was, there's this lady, she is asked to put both of her hands on the table.
Mm.
And this gentleman kind of comes and brings a fake hand, but with the same fabric of the dress she's wearing, he covers it. And then what he says is like, start looking at the fake hand and your own real hand. And
Wow.
he starts applying, like, almost like using two pencils, and just
Mm.
telling her like, oh, do you feel the sensation even in the fake hand? And she
Mm.
goes, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then he takes a something heavy and punches the fake hand, and she screams. And this is a video that's out there, and when you see
Yeah.
that, like, wow. So
Yes.
similarly, when we're looking at life and
Mhm.
when we focus on things,
Mhm.
that's where our focus goes. So brain is designed very
Yes.
beautifully to focus on things where we are focused on. So
Yeah.
now if you take that focus away, that, oh gosh, I don't have any other options, and
Mhm.
you open up yourself to different possibilities, you'll start seeing so many new possibilities and opportunities. So let's go back to what you said.
Okay.
How can people know who they are?
Well, the key is to turn inward and realize that our interior life is primary. Our external life is secondary. Most people have that reversed. And when I suggest to them that they turn toward themselves, they go, "What are you talking about?" So that's your question. So there are many different ways to cultivate a relationship with our own body, with our own experience, our own deeper nature. Some of those things are meditation. I can't explain why meditation works, but meditation brings me closer to my heart and the center of my being. It changes the texture of my day. And then there's also journaling. There's a wonderful journal in a book called The Artist's Way by Julia
Mhm.
Cameron. And she has morning pages over, it's a 12-week program in spirituality and creativity. And it's beautiful and it's grounded. So you start to reveal to yourself what's going on that you haven't been paying attention to. So again, it's unique to each person. Some people may not like to journal. Somebody might say, I'm going to go see a therapist because I need to know myself better. I need to be with someone who can hold with me and listen to me while I'm in the discovery process. Another option is to go to a transformational workshop, which can be very, very powerful and pierce through these layers of protection and being unconscious. That's where I opened up the most when I was 25. So, and I could go on. There are many different tools. Or you go into a bookstore and you look for a book that for some reason jumps off the shelf for you. The title speaks to you. So part of it is having a courageous conversation with yourself
Mm.
and saying, you write down honestly, it's like, I'm lonely, or I haven't been happy for a long time, or I'm afraid, or I'm not comfortable with not knowing. So all these discoveries start to open up a road and a direction. And it's my work is all centered around the authentic self. So the authentic self just starts to arise and starts to actually take the lead. So as you embrace the interior life, a direction starts to open up outwardly of meaning and purpose. Serendipity happens. And the authentic self can start to step out. And then the good news is the experience often is, I like this. This is me. I feel like I'm me now.
So while they're on the journey of discovery, so what happens is that people get dissuaded.
Mhm.
People don't experience success immediately, and then they feel disappointed and discouraged.
Yes.
What should they do in that situation?
Often that the reason that is, and I write about this in my book, there's getting to know your authentic self, and I got to know mine, and I get to know it better all the time throughout my life. But there's also the willingness, this is the courageous conversation, to look at what is my false self? What are some of the ways I adapted to trauma in the past that put me at a distance from myself? For me, mine, when my parents were going through all that with my brother and sister, I put up a front so I could please everybody and I wouldn't have any conflict and I wouldn't cause anybody any problems. But I certainly wasn't being transparent and I tuned out of who I was. So there's this false self that all of us have, or adapted self. It's powerful to identify what it is for you, because that will be the gateway, the gate that opens up and goes into the authentic self. And the key when you're looking at the false self, it's not negative or bad. It rose up inside of us. We employed it to protect ourselves through trauma so we didn't experience it again. So we're careful around an alcoholic father because we don't want to get hit. And we know that. We pay attention to the cues. Problem is, when we're 55, we're still doing that, and the father's long gone. So the key is when you discover and identify the nature of your adaptation and false self is to love it. It's not the enemy. That's where people make a mistake. They want to make that the enemy and try to root it out of themselves. That place needs compassion and understanding. My teenage boy was so wounded. I still work with that, but I've worked with it throughout my life because certain situations, it touches that nerve and it's raw. And I know that. So I give myself permission to have feelings. I do reach out for support, which is what I didn't do when I was younger. Is that helpful?
Yes, reaching out for support. And that is such a powerful statement because so many times we think we are alone. So many times we think that we have to be what will please other people. And it's not serving anyone,
Right.
least of all you, because you are the most important person in your life. And it doesn't mean trampling over anybody else. It's just about bringing that love and compassion to yourself. And when you bring that love and compassion to yourself, you'll be surprised that you'll be able to extend that to other people. And as they say, if your cup is empty, you can't pour it out for others.
Right.
Similarly, if you're full of compassion, empathy, courage, and love, you'll be able to hand it out to other people because it's you become that. So,
Yeah.
as we're talking about that,
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about your book and how people can reach out to you.
Well, thank you. My book is called The Real You, Leading Your Life from Your Authentic Self. So it introduces people to the world in the first section about the authentic self. I'm astonished that we weren't taught that in grade school because we all have it inside. We're not taught spirituality aside from religion, but that's so fundamental. So the world of the authentic self and the world of the false self, and begin to have them have a relationship with each other. I find the false self is willing to relinquish its control when the lead of the authentic self starts coming in. Then the whole middle section of the book is all different forms of methodology for connecting and becoming more rooted in the authentic self. And then the third is when we get rooted in who we are, we naturally begin to feel like we have gifts and a vision and we want to serve. That's just like the natural thing a tree does. It grows branches and then it grows fruit. So, but if we go in sequence, and so the book, my website is gavinfrye.com, GAVINFRYE.com. And I also have a lot of YouTube videos and a lot of Instagram videos about my work. People, if they resonate with what we're talking about and me, they can get the book also at Amazon under The Real You with Gavin Frye.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And to continue our conversation, people would like to, I'm sure our listeners would like to know, when you started out, you had gone through a lot of trauma and all that. Where are you right now? And how did your parents, or if you want to share anything else?
Yeah. Well, amazingly so, my brother and my sister and my parents all entered a spiritual path of deep meaning of getting to know themselves. My brother did it through Christianity. My sister did it through Narcotics Anonymous. My mom and my dad followed me in doing transformational seminars and therapy. So it was quite dark, but boy, did it turn. And that's the nature of my book is how do we take the most difficult times and actually experience triumph? And we can do that. Life is meant to do that. And you mentioned a key. It's getting support. Support is so key, but also getting the right support. Um, you have to listen to your intuition as to whether you feel safe. What you want to look for, let's say in a therapist or in a mentor at a job or some training, is you want to go and explore the experience as an experiment and only continue if something inside of you says, I have no question this is for me. This is beyond helpful to me and I know it. You want to look for that because that's what's going to help the most is something that's really aligned where you feel and you want to be with someone who actually sees who you are and not just focus on doing and your performance. They can do both, but they have that distinction. They have a maturity themselves in their relationship with themselves.
hmm So, can you share 2 to 3 actionable tips that our leaders can take and step into authentic leadership?
Yes. One is sit down and actually write down all the things relative to your business that you see, but that you're afraid to address. You actually have to identify where you're turning away because that will be the doorway to take a courageous conversation. That's one thing to do. Two is have somebody that you employ for support where you can be totally honest, totally vulnerable. So I have entrepreneurs come and do therapy with me all the time because they realized it's not therapy. It's we have a bond that creates a container for the self-discovery process. And I'm able to reflect who they are to them, encourage them in taking risks. So there's leverage and power and bounty in having somebody, particularly if you're a CEO, you need a safe place to go it's going to be held confidential. The third is, I think, is to open up a relationship, a dialogue with your body. The body has so much wisdom And all we need to do is ask. We ask the body if we're going through some kind of a situation where we've got, let's say, an endocrine problem. We can actually sit down and write a dialogue and say, endocrine, do you have any information for me about our life that I can act on to be able to bring more balance to you? Now, just asking, just assuming that you can get the answer, it's astonishing how much information comes when we ask. In a similar way, I have people build a relationship with their authentic self. They have a journal. So they go small s for small me, then big S for authentic self. And they go, oh, today is really, really, really hard. And I don't want to go to work, but I have to. And then big S, and you don't know what you're going to write when you write big S. You just write whatever comes. Again, assuming you can have a dialogue with your authentic self or your soul, yes, you can. You actually can. It's actually pretty straightforward. Most people just don't try it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
having that conversation, and body carries a lot of memory. So sometimes and when you're talking about meditation, is just feeling the tension and just observing it, being with it. And it is so surprising that sometimes when you have pain in a certain joint or something like that, and you just observe it and be with it without judging it, that pain seems to dissolve. So not only you can get answers, you can also relieve the pain and bring in healing. It's about opening up your body and your mind and spirit to growth. And it's just fascinating. It has so many different aspects and so many different, so many times you're just in awe of what can be revealed and what can you discover. So, well, thank you for joining us, Gavin.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking questions. You have a presence, Divya, that is honorable and curious and not dominating. You're receptive and feminine, but you also have wisdom. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Well, thank you, Gavin. I appreciate your warm and kind words. And thank you for sharing your nuggets.
Okay.
And listeners, thank you for joining us. Thank you for reaching out to us. You have always been so wonderful in doing that. Reach out and let us know, how can we support you? How can we make your life more richer? How can we make your life more meaningful? And how can we support you so that you can impact others? Reach out to us, and we are here to serve and support you. And thank you, Juan, for being there, for making everything technically so seamless. So, folks, until next time, be well and take care.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.